So be aware when you search the internet. I'm not saying stay away completely from .coms, because there are many .coms that are actually quite good. The ones that are quite good will reference everything. So if they're not referencing the source of information, don't touch it. And another amazing source of information, believe it or not, is blogs. Because many curators and many museums run blogs. All right, a blog is like it's like an interactive bulletin board, where someone will put an article up there, and it's open for public comment and critique, and they will interact with people. But do not always trust a blog either, because another thing that a blog is, it's like an editorial. Right? In other words, it's someone's opinion and what it is that causes them to have that opinion, and so they put it out there. So because it's someone's opinion does not necessarily mean that it's true. But it does give you ways of looking at content and artists and themes in ways that, that you can look at around the world in real time. You can also be doing site visitation. That's why one of the things that I've asked you to do as you're preparing for this first part of your assignment, I'm forcing you to go to MOCNA. That's an important part of research. And in this case, you're analyzing the 2013 winter exhibitions and looking at the relative success. But you are looking at the themes, too, as well as the way they've been presented, and even the curatorial views of the people who put those different, who curated those different exhibits. So you're visiting studios, and it may be artist studios. You're visiting various galleries, and we have a whole street of galleries in Santa Fe. And what's that street named? Canyon Road. That we are visiting various culture centers. There are 2 cultural centers very close by. What are they? Poe? What else? We got one up north, one down south. Pueblo Cultural Center. Forgot I had the headphone on, it was covering up my ear, and all I saw was your lips moving. We can also be collecting materials from the artists themselves in their studios. Some of the materials we might be collecting could be their images of their work, or we can ask them to be sent to us. Their CVs, the CV stands for curriculum vitae, which is different than a resume. A resume is what you submit when you are asking to be employed someplace. As compared to a vitae, which is much larger, it's your resume on steroids. Because the vitae includes everything you have done. Every accomplishment, where you went to school, what you wrote, where you performed, everything you have done in your professional career, as compared to a resume where you actually tailor your resume to the specific position you're applying for. That's why resumes come down to being only 1 or 2 pages long, and a vitae can look like a telephone book with some people. Publications as well as artist statements. Reading the statements of various artists, especially if you can't actually go and visit them, you get an idea of their own philosophy, their own view of why they do what they do, sometimes how they do what they do, and then you can see, does this fit? Do they fit the story that I want to tell? That's what you're doing when you're curating an exhibit. You are telling a story. So as you are doing your research then, as you are finding out more and more about less and less, it's like what we call a funnel approach. In many ways, it's kind of like going for your associate's degree, and you're doing an associate's in fine arts. You go for your bachelor's degree and you decide you want to be really specialized in painting. Then you go for your MFA and you want to become interested in, we'll say, post-Renaissance painting. And then you go for your doctorate and you focus on a specific artist. More and more about less and less. That's what specialization is. It's the same way we think about when we're curating an exhibit. that we are funneling the information so that we end up with this nugget of the idea. Because it's a lot easier to tell one story than to try to tell many of them. So it's best that we do this one story really well. So when we're selecting artists and or works, we are doing this in many ways. We can even set up, I've seen curators who actually go in with a check sheet. Right? They actually have a grid as they're looking at various artists' work. And they check off, all right, the various categories they set up in their mind, what a specific piece an artist would do to fit into this exhibit. And it helps them, especially if you're in a place like LA, and you've got so many artists and so many galleries, it can really help you narrow the field very quickly. You can do this on your cell phones now too. And once you have selected artists and or works, do the artists actually agree with having this stuff included in the exhibit? Or if you are doing it with objects, we'll say historical objects, do the museums or the cultural centers agree with those objects being on loan? Because once there is a consent for that object to leave that institution, you open up a whole new doorway in law, which is accountability and insurance. Once someone agrees something is going to leave that institution, someone's liable for it. So whose permissions are needed? As part of your research, though, it's a good idea to build relationships with other curators. Sometimes you can do collaborative efforts, all right, where several people can be working on the same exhibit, or at least giving ideas. One of the challenges, though, particularly in the Euro-American and the European mind, because curators have in many ways become these superstars, you know, that no one else likes someone else's spotlight shining through theirs. So working collaboratively really does involve putting your ego in check and saying the story's more important than my visibility. This is a challenge once you get into this level of visibility. So you're building relationships with other curators, museums, and galleries if you're going to be borrowing works, or sometimes purchasing them. And then you have to ask yourself, can the works be delivered on time? Can the artist produce if they do not already have the work, but they've given you an idea? They said, I'm not interested in pop art, particularly as we would see it related to comic book heroes in the 21st century. But I would love to do this. Can that artist pull it off within that time frame that you're going to go from your idea to when the exhibit's being mounted? What was this notion right here? Can works be delivered on time? There were a couple of shows here, Changing Hands, that came to here. What was funny in reading the first catalog for this exhibit, because it was a traveling exhibit, it was curated by David McFadden and Ellen Taubman. Ellen Taubman is the wife of the guy who runs Sotheby's auctions. And you see Sotheby's particularly related to land sales around here. Sotheby's is one of the major venues for auctioning historic as well as contemporary Native American art. Sotheby's has been one of these places of conflict where objects that should not have been at exhibit ended up at exhibit. So when you're working in collaboration with McFadden, or, no relation to me, I'm Fadden. When you're working with McFadden or Taubman, you are in so-called blessed company as far as the art world goes, particularly related to tribal arts. What I really enjoyed with the first exhibit is that because they were working with so many people who are normal artists, they're native artists, I don't know many Indians who buy art. There are a few because they've become the darlings. They become the Elvis artists. Tony Abeta can afford to buy art. He's doing pretty well. A lot of artists trade. There were people who said they were going to have their work included in this very prestigious traveling exhibition. They sold the piece before Taubman and McFadden could get their hands on it. All right, so they agreed to have a piece there, and then they had to sell it because they didn't have any money.